do. I'm going to play with them. Get her out of here.
Are you crazy? That thing will kill you.
He's right, it's magic. So am I.
No, Illy!
I am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Balls. Prepare for Prattle.
Puny Pod. Welcome to Prattle World. I am your host, the ever-amazing, ever-spectacular Spider-Dan, and in this podcast, I spotlight entertainment's best-kept secrets that a mainstream audience may find boring. And welcome to another Puny Pod, a short-form podcast where I visit a specific film or comic book all by myself. Yes, so I am alone here for the first ever installment of Wizard Month. So I have pre-recorded some of these already. Some are still being recorded quite late into the fact, including this one. But we are rolling on, we're rolling ahead, and we are cracking on with the very first installment. So I've got a lot, I've got an amazing lot of guests to share with you. I've got some films and some comics, which I'm going to share today. So much so, I've been looking forward to this. And you guys on the Patreon, you voted for this over Andy's World War II month. So we'll get to him and towards the end of the month and his feelings on that. Don't you worry, he has feelings. But we're going to be talking today about X-Men, Magik, Illyana, and Storm. So if you listen to our Underrated X-Men podcast with me and Ben, the attention-seeking geek, go and listen and watch all of his stuff. I'm going to be on his Obi-Wan Kenobi YouTube live video series very soon, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't do any of the Comics in Motion stuff because I promised Ben, but I'm going to be on every single one of those, so it's going to be really fun, so go check that out. But if you listen to that podcast, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of Illyana Rasputin, so Colossus's sister in the X-Men, and she is an X-Man herself, and joined the New Mutants in their early days, and has grown on to become probably one of the more popular female characters within the X-Men franchise. She has teleporting abilities, she creates these stepping discs, but also, which we're going to get into in this story, has a ton of kind of mystical and magical powers, and that's really one of the more interesting things about her. Initially, when she was in the X-Men comics, she was just, Colossus's kind of baby sister, and she'd pop up here and there, like she'd be a hostage, like Arcade took her hostage, and a few other instances maybe when Colossus would go back home and stuff. But this is when I think she was visiting again with the X-Men. Getting off topic, but I just love the character. I think her backstory, which again is huge. This story is hugely influencing on her character, because before she basically didn't have a character. She was just a child. Unfortunately, she wasn't given much agency, didn't really have any kind of opinions or insights or anything. She was just kind of there, and there's nothing wrong with that to a degree, but this is the story that basically forms her character and really changes her, because she goes through a gamut of emotions and issues and abuse, and I love that character. I thought she was great in the New Mutants movie. Again, I know a lot of people didn't like that, but I thought the characters were treated fairly well. I think they were fairly well defined. They were reflective of what I expected in the comic book for the most part. I think maybe Bobby and Sam maybe needed a bit more work or a bit more, but I think the female characters specifically were really strong in that film. And yeah, I love when the X-Men mixes with stuff that it doesn't usually kind of touch on. Like I like when it brings in kind of magic elements or horror elements, like they fight Dracula. You know, Chris Claremont was having a lot of fun, obviously, but also, you know, he did all sorts of weird decisions and stuff. And, you know, whether you like his work or not, and again, I'm going to get onto that. It's up to you, but I appreciate when they did something out of the realm of what they normally kind of standard, you know, Sentinels, Magneto, evil mutants, that sort of thing. I liked that. I've always did. So yeah, the collection I'm reading, which is X-Men Magik, Illyana, and Storm, and that is it collects issue X-Men Uncanny X-Men 160, and then the title miniseries 1 to 4, the complete miniseries of Magik, Illyana, and Storm. So while training in the Bermuda Triangle, so this is after a clash with Magneto, who was living there, basically. I think Cyclops stumbles upon it and becomes him and his then sort of girlfriend or you know, love interest at the time were there. Maybe, I don't know if they even became love interests. I think they kind of played with the idea, but then they brought in Madeline Pryor. Anyway, they are in the Bermuda Triangle, and the reason they were there is because Magneto's base was there, and it's this kind of almost Lovecraftian-esque kind of ancient civilization kind of city sort of thing. They had a fight with Magneto, they defeated him, but not before. Basically, that issue is 150, if I remember rightly. And it ends with kind of Magneto crying and breaking down because he injures Kitty Pryde, who is a fellow person of Jewish descent, and this kind of breaks him. And this was the point where Magneto began his road to redemption. You know, you could argue whether he was ever truly redeemed, or, you know, he dips in and out of how evil he wants to be, but that's what kind of makes him a very interesting character. Anyway, again, back to the point. So the X-Men are basically training and having a good old kind of sparring session on this kind of in the Bermuda Triangle. And all of a sudden, Belasco, who is a demonic kind of prince of hell sort of thing, who lives in Limbo, so I guess the prince of Limbo, he decides that he wants Illyana for himself. And he wants to corrupt her and make her his bride and use her soul to create bloodstones. And these bloodstones would help bring about the return of his masters, the Elder Gods. So what happens is Illyana's dragged in, and the X-Men follow on this adventure, and they discover that the X-Men have already been here. What? And it is an older version. They meet older versions of themselves. They meet dead versions of themselves. They meet evil versions of themselves. And it's all because in this alternate timeline, they did manage to rescue Illyana, but they actually got stuck there themselves. So Illyana made it back to Earth safely, but they did not. And spoilers, I will be going into a lot of spoilers with this. The opposite happens in this. So Illyana is not saved. She is taken by Belasco, and even though they are helped by a sorceress, Storm, who attempts to help them and does manage to kind of change history, so to speak, and they get back, and then just as they have Illyana in their hands, like Kitty's holding on to her, like come on, and she lets go for a split second, lets go of her. But because time works differently in Limbo, which I'll again get onto, she lets go and grabs her again, and by the time that split second has gone by, she is aged 7 years. So she's now a teenager. She's gone from like not a toddler, but you know, a very young child to a teenager, a full-grown teenager, and it's a bit mad. That's kind of how it ends. So she's basically, in many ways, and again we'll get onto it, has lost her innocence. She doesn't discuss her time in Limbo. She doesn't go on about it. She pretty much keeps it all to herself. And the real development of her character, arguably, the creation, arguably, of her character happens in this story. But the development and where I became really interested in her and her story was during the run of the New Mutants, where she becomes a key player and arguably the star of that book, arguably, I'd say, because she's just so fascinating to read about. So that's issue X-Men 160, which again kind of gives away the ending of the miniseries, but it's interesting to kind of fill in the gaps between. So I'm glad they included that in this collection. And so Illyana is, again, pulled in by Belasco, and Storm manages to save her from Belasco for the time being. And she casts him away or kind of causes a spell or escapes him in whatever way. I think they teleport away or something. And Storm in this alternate timeline was actually, she knows Magik because she was a student of Belasco, so she took up the kind of bride aspect, and she then realized how evil she was becoming, and potentially, taking over as Belasco's kind of bride or the ruler of Limbo, and she decided to turn against that and began kind of fighting against him and the evil version of Nightcrawler, who he kind of has under his power. Colossus is dead. Wolverine is also dead, and they've been killed by Sim, who gets introduced in X-Men 160, Uncanny X-Men 160, who is kind of this almost like a biker gangster, kind of this kind of leather jacketed super strong guy. Like, he's throwing like Wolverine's claws, the skeleton of Wolverine's claws. He's throwing them at Colossus, and yeah, he's a real tough bruiser of a character, and he's interesting in his own right, but he's played in a very modern way, like he is from Earth, and Belasco is this very Shakespearean style villain and antagonist, very Faustian sort of thing. So yeah, and basically Storm begins to teach her Magik and to raise her and to teach her things. And we discover that Kitty Pryde is still alive in this timeline as well, and she wasn't able to help in that fight in the previous issue. But what's happened to her is that she's been partly transformed into an actual cat, and she prefers being called Cat as well. And she's got this kind of ninja outfit with a big sword and these massive shurikens she wears on her costume. Now, her and Storm both have ideas of what they need to do and how they can use Illyana to stop Belasco. So, but because of all the horrible things that have happened to both Storm and Kitty and the rest of the X-Men, they do contemplate killing this tiny child, because if Belasco ever gets his hands on her, she's going to go through the worst possible experience ever of her life. And these guys have experienced it, so they know. So there's quite the stakes are quite high already. But you also get them kind of disagreeing on how they should kind of train her and what they need to do. And they break off, basically. Storm says, no, you're not teaching her you're not teaching her this way. We're going to raise her this way. So she disagrees. And then later on, she comes back to Storm's kind of place and basically kidnaps Illyana. And then she takes her to this remade version of a Limbo version of the Savage Land. So in Belasco's first appearance, he fought Ka-Zar in the Savage Land and was driven away because he was trying to use Shana the She-Devil as his bride, basically, to bring about the return of the Elder Gods as well. So he's kind of he's a bit bitter and twisted about it. So much so he creates these statues of them and kind of shouts at them and scowls at them, and he's not happy with Ka-Zar, basically. So he holds a grudge. But yeah, so Kat has then kidnapped Illyana, and she is then taught, like, she grows in age kind of drastically. I will talk about the kind of the timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff later on. But she grows in age and she's been taught combat, and Kat is well-trained, obviously trained by Wolverine. She knows how to fight in more ways than one. So she's adding to that. And what happens then is they decide this is it. They're going to storm the castle. They're going to kill Belasco, and they're going to send Illyana home. It's the only way. They have to kill. Basically, the problem with killing Belasco is Limbo. So you can't kill Belasco without destroying where you are at, sort of thing. So it's an interesting kind of predicament to get out of. But Illyana and then Nightcrawler, Illyana and Cat, like Nightcrawler's really fucked up in this version. He basically represents like the Nightcrawler in the book. Obviously, he has the demonic appearance, but deep down, he is the most lovable, cuddly elf, and religious, deeply religious man as well. And, ladies' man as well, on top of all the other character traits. He's still my favourite X-Man, regardless of what the writers have done or killed him off or whatever. He's the best X-Man, and he represents that ideal that Xavier has, that dream that he has. But in this version, in that first issue of Uncanny X-Men, he is groping. He is groping Cat. It doesn't say exactly where she's been groped, but it's implied to be a very intimate area. But so that's why she knows that wasn't, the regular Kitty knows that that's not Nightcrawler because of that. He's like, he would never do something like that. But they managed to kill Nightcrawler. They managed to trap him in the floor and snap his neck, I believe, if I remember rightly. Then Cat uses Belasco's magic and stuff in the castle to send Illyana home. But it is all for naught, as it is revealed it was all a ruse and she didn't actually go home. And all the X-Men she sees are evil because it's not really them. And now Belasco has his hands on Illyana. Now he's then again, time jumps again, and Belasco is heavily taught her, and she's well under his influence in the world of kind of the black magics and stuff. And what he does with Cat is he turns her into a full cat human. So she's got no control over herself. She's just a literal kind of cat beast. And while she's trying to escape and Illyana's trying to run away, she is forced to kill Cat, and she snaps her neck because she's about to kill Storm, who is resolved again, because she knows Belasco has his hands on Illyana, to kill Illyana before they can bring about this return of the Elder Gods, because it's too dangerous, not only for Illyana, but for all of reality, basically. When she manages to escape Belasco, Belasco strands her in the wasteland of Limbo, and she's dying, she's cold, she's hungry. And during this point, her mutant powers emerge, which is, again, the teleporting stepping discs. And this really tragic moment happens where she teleports herself home. She goes straight back to Russia. She meets her parents, and she's like, "It's me, Illyana, I'm home." And they're like, "What are you talking about? Our daughter is not that old. Who are you? How dare you? How dare you offend us? How dare you come back and lie? How dare you? Who are you? I don't care. Get out of my house." And Illyana is visibly upset. And again, time and reality and space is all confused in Limbo. So all these kind of things could not have happened. Could be an alternative timeline. Could be the right one. Could be the wrong one. Don't know where in time she lands. And she's devastated because they are fucking rude to her. But it is Illyana. It's definitely Illyana. And then the New Mutants pop up as well when she goes back to Limbo. She has to go back to Limbo because she's not strong enough yet, I think, or something like that. It's quite an in-depth book. There is a lot of stuff to kind of remember. It's been a while since I read it now, but there's a lot of dialogue, obviously, because it's Chris Claremont. So there's a lot of, ooh, and this and this and this. Very descriptive. But yeah, the New Mutants turn up, but they're like, oh, that's Illyana, but not the Illyana we know. So it basically implies that later on, they're going to have a time travel adventure where they're going to meet this version of Illyana even though they know the first one they meet is the oldest version of Illyana at that point, which is when she comes out of the adventure. But yeah, and she eventually tries to replicate the magic that Storm used. So Storm's magic is like kind of earth-based and kind of very much to her, because she's a lover of plants and nature and all this sort of stuff. So she can create like an acorn. So Illyana's trying to master these powers that have been taught to her by Belasco and by Storm and a little bit of Kitty, and she's trying to combine everything, and it just doesn't work. She can't get it to work. But then she decides, why am I trying to create something that isn't me, that doesn't represent me? What if I created a weapon? And she creates the first soul sword. So she pulls it out of herself. The Dark Child as well starts coming out of her at this point. Like it's kind of her demonic kind of other self, her kind of Jekyll and Hyde persona. And it's more, she has a more demonic look and a scarier look. And again, every time she uses this soul sword, like more and more of the armor grows on her. This would come to a finale somewhat in the storyline, the crossover Inferno during the 80s, a little bit. But again, she's died and come back, and she basically, spoilers for that event as well, but she, again, you can read this on a Wikipedia, you probably already have. She kind of gets rid of her demonic powers and everything and goes back to being her original age. But then, unfortunately, she contracts the legacy virus, which is basically a metaphor for, it's a trade-off for it's like mutant AIDS, basically, unfortunately, or HIV. And she dies of that really tragically. However, she does come back to life because it's X-Men. And who doesn't die and come back to life in these stories? That's all they ever do. But yes, so Illyana creates his soul sword and almost defeats Belasco. He turns human, she becomes more demonic, but then she realizes, I don't want to become like him. I don't want to be like Belasco. I'm better than that. So he escapes, and she leaves Limbo because was taking over Limbo, and that's it. She goes home, and that's where it picks up, and Kitty grabs her again and pulls her out. But yeah, that is the story itself. It's fun. I would say I enjoyed it a lot, but there was a lot of stuff I wasn't. I'd say it's good. It is a good story. It's solid. It's got everything you want. I will say there was a few things that confused me, or I didn't really understand. So, like, Belasco is periodically creating these bloodstones, but there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason why and when he creates them. It's not like, I feel like if there was some sort of thing like, oh, now we can create a bloodstone, and now we can create the bloodstone because of this, you've done this. Or maybe if there was like a prophecy where something would occur, or this will occur, and the next bloodstone will be created. But it kind of just seems to just like, yep, now, here's another one. And I was like, it doesn't, like, or if there was some sort of phenomenal event, like Storm dies or Cat dies, and it's like, now I can create the bloodstone because you've been through this and you've experienced this, and something like that. I didn't get that. And I think problem is with magic, you kind of have to set some sort of rules or structure with it. And I think that's not always how it works in the thing. Tom Palmer inks the story. I forgot to say who wrote it as well. I said Chris Claremont wrote it, but the art was by John Buscema, Sal Buscema, and Ron Frenz. But the inking is by Tom Palmer, which I don't mind his inking. The only problem is you always know it's him doing the inking, and he did and it sometimes kind of not ruin the art, but it's almost like it puts on like it's a filter almost. It's an inking filter that goes over the art, and sometimes I appreciate it, sometimes it looks good, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know if it really works with this art. So yeah, love it or loathe it, he does the inks in this. So if you're familiar with the work of all those artists, you will notice it looks specifically quite different. It's because Tom Palmer's inks are so heavy. And again, they're not bad. They are not bad. It's just that, unfortunately, you lose some of the art underneath his work. Another thing I didn't really like or appreciate was the story seems to be quite linear. It seems to happen over almost a couple of weeks, or almost instantly. You pick up from the last issue. You know, it's not very clear how much time has passed, but she just all of a sudden is just like, oh, I'm older. And I'm like, okay, but I thought it was going to be kind of like Interstellar rules where, you know, actually she had lived the full 7 years of her life in Limbo, like full years, and then on Earth it was only a moment. But then it kind of does explain why the X-Men haven't aged, or they go basically straight back to the time they left. So I guess that kind of makes sense that it's just all changing and constantly moving. So like certain characters will age, but certain ones won't. I get it, but I just felt, again, it needed a bit more kind of consistency. And I guess maybe he's playing with the kind of loose rules for later on. He didn't want to restrict himself story-wise, but it was just like, oh, it's just different, and I need her to be a teenager so she can join the New Mutants. It did feel a little forced, but I don't know. It's one of those, but it's miles may vary, I will say. But I love this character. I love all of this. Could it have gone a bit darker? Maybe not at the time in the 80s. I don't think you can go this dark with this much darker with a mainstream title, because obviously in the film, you know, this obviously is reflective of real life kind of tragedies and horrible instances of you know, girls being child brides or, you know, sex slaves and things like that. That's very much reflective in her story. But obviously they use the demonic possession and stuff as a kind of a framing device to tell that story. And I think it does work to a degree, but I think they kind of dance around it a little bit. I think in more modern comics you see a bit more of that backstory and what really was kind of done to her, and the kind of devastating and why she's, you know, a little bit evil or a bit fucked up. You know, that's what makes her a really fascinating character. I love her dark sense of humor. I love how she's she's very sassy. I love that she doesn't suffer fools gladly as well. She's got a cool sword, like all the armor and stuff. Like every iteration of her has a really cool, definitive look. And I you know, I loved her in the film, like I said. And I think her way of sorcery and her going around it was really interesting, and the way how she struggled. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just magic now and that's it. It was a proper struggle and a learning experience. I love seeing these alternate X-Men as well and what could have been. I think there's a lot to like about this story. I don't think it's the best X-Men story I've ever read, but you know, what is going to be? There's so many kind of classic ones out there. But I think if you like the idea of a mystical X-Man and a character like this that has been through this sort of kind of trauma, and if you like magic, if you like wizards, this is the story for you, I think. But yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed me chatting absolute rubbish yet again. This comic is available on Comixology and loads of other places, eBay and Amazon, no doubt. So if you want to do that, it's also collected in I think it's the New Mutants Epic Collection. I think the Volume 1 of the New Mutants Epic Collection it's collected in with the Uncanny X-Men issue as well. So yeah, give that a go if you like it. If you like the sound of it. If you haven't read it already, go read it. Tell me what you think. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm right. Tell me what you think as well. But yeah, that's genuinely the story, and that's it. But that's the first installment of Wizard Month. I hope you're enjoying it so far, and I hope you have much more enjoyment in the future episodes. I know I do. So I hope you're enjoying. But next up, we're going to have Paul Dumack is going to be in, and the Super Dummy Paul. If you don't listen to Comics in Motion, head over, or and his podcast as well. Check that out. I'll leave links to that as well below. We're going to be talking about Fred Ward's Cast a Deadly Spell. Now, I'm going to say this up front. We recorded this before the death of Fred Ward, so if we don't mention it, you know why. Basically, it's been recorded way, way before, and it's really tragic that he is gone just as we were literally covering a film that he was in and that he's the lead of. But yeah, we will see you next week, and patrons, you will be getting this early because you are amazing, so I'm going to get this out to you as soon as possible. So you can find me again at Secret Bores on Facebook, Twitter it's Dan_Bores, Instagram, it's SpiderDan Secret Bores. Review, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to use the hashtag #PrepareForPrattle when you interact with us. If you want to join the Prattalion and to be briefed in full on the Secret Bores, swing over to Prattle World at SpiderDanandtheSecretBores.com. Okay, I'd like to also thank my patrons, amazing people. I Am Jack's Musings, Paul Meller, Max Burns, Scott Hodgson, Simon Cotton, Mike Burton, and Angry Andy Reviews for their continuing donations. It is very much appreciated and helps Prattle World keep on turning. If you find yourself in a position to help the podcast, please consider it. Okay, guys, I'll leave you there. Thank you again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Wizard Month.